listening to the Metal Command Podcast.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome back to the Metal Command Podcast. And it's finally come out, something I've been waiting a very long time for. Black Sabbath put out a box set reissuing the only 4 albums that they have really not reissued yet. And that is, of course, this box set here, Anno Domini, 1989 to 1995, which encompasses 4 of the 5 albums Tony Martin sang on while he was in Black Sabbath. Now, up until now, every other album in the Black Sabbath discography has had a reissue. You know, Ozzy Osbourne, all of those albums that he sang on, in the 70s, all of those have had a deluxe or super deluxe version of them come out with a lot of really cool bonus tracks and unreleased stuff. All the stuff that Dio was on, again, all that stuff either had a deluxe or super deluxe version of it. I know there were deluxe versions of Born Again, which of course featured Ian Gillan of Deep Purple as their singer, and of course Seventh Star. The one weird, kind of the album that everybody forgets about, which had Glenn Hughes on vocals. That one also had a deluxe version come out. So the only 4 albums that did not were the last 4 albums that Tony sang on. If you recall, they did release a version of The Eternal Idol, which had a double CD version come out. And of course, that was the first album Tony Martin sang on. But the 4 albums in this box set had not been technically reissued. So the 4 albums that are in this box, I'm going to talk about all 4 of them. And those albums are Headless Cross, TYR, Cross Purposes, and of course, Forbidden. Now, Forbidden came out in 1995, and the interesting part about that is the version of Forbidden in this album, in this box set, is a remixed version, and that remix was done by Tony Iommi himself. So let's talk about the box set, and then I'm going to talk about the album. So this is a really cool little set, and I'm going to open it up here and kind of show everybody what's actually in this. But the thing is, I've always looked at Tony Martin. Tony Martin, first of all, I'm gonna be flat out honest with everybody. Probably one of the guys who had the biggest impact on my singing voice. I would say he is my second favorite Black Sabbath singer behind Ronnie James Dio. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh my God, how could you think that?" But I'm talking strictly from a vocalist perspective and his voice. I love his voice. Next to Dio, he's, in my opinion, singing wise, I have him pretty close to Dio. Dio is still my favorite Sabbath singer, but Martin would be number 2 for me. And honestly, I think he is the most underrated singer in Black Sabbath. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's a lot of people out there that don't like the Tony Martin era. Some people say they love his voice, but they didn't like him in Sabbath. No, it is what it is. But the reason I say he is the most underrated singer that ever fronted Black Sabbath is this. Obviously, Ozzy Osbourne and Dio are seen as icons. They always get their just due as far as respect and recognition. Ian Gillan, the Born Again album, does have some mixed feelings about it from a lot of fans. However, Ian Gillan earned his respect in Deep Purple, and same thing with Glenn Hughes. So Tony Martin is kind of like this guy that really not many people had heard of that ended up in the band. And in my opinion, I believe that more and more people have given him more respect as time has gone on, and more people have gravitated to the albums he did with Black Sabbath, which hence why they reissued this stuff. But I still think, to me, he's the most underrated singer in Black Sabbath. So looking at the contents, we have a poster, Headless Cross poster, actually. Pretty cool stuff. I ended up getting the vinyl box set as well, which hasn't arrived yet, but it's going to have a lot of this cool stuff. So that cool poster is in there. There's a replica of the Headless Cross tour book, which is pretty cool. It's a little mini replica. I'm going to guess the vinyl edition might have that in there. I haven't looked, but really cool thing here. And then you have, I always keep the table of contents handy. Then you have this book here, which is a lot of notes about the albums and a lot of things that were written about, a lot of really cool stuff in this. And the one thing I do like about this, and a lot of the other box sets, they have more of a hardbound book. And it always feels like when you open those up, it feels like the pages are going to fall out. This is not a hardbound book, and actually it feels a lot better like that's not going to happen when it comes to the box set. And, of course, you have the slipcase LP replica CDs. So we'll put all this back in here, and let's talk a bit about each one of these albums, because I definitely feel that, this portion or this era of Black Sabbath, again, I think is highly underrated, and these albums are phenomenal. And for me, just so you guys know where I come from as a fan, Tony Iommi for me is Black Sabbath, and he kept the band going all these years despite having different singers. And even though they started out they started out in the 70s with Ozzy, I still think they made I don't think Black Sabbath has made a bad album to begin with. So I'm going to talk about the 4 albums that are in this box set. I'm also going to talk about the remix and what I think about the Forbidden remix. And, the Forbidden album was remixed, which came out in 1995. The original mix I didn't think was all that great, but I'm going to comment on that. And I like it better in some ways, and I'm disappointed in that mix in some ways as well. So first of all, let's talk about Headless Cross. So Headless Cross is, in 1989 came out, and to me, it is a top 5 Black Sabbath album. When I go look at the Black Sabbath catalog and I want to listen to them, it's probably one of the 5 albums that I love to listen to and that I actually go to. So, for example, my top 5, and this is in no particular order: Heaven and Hell, Sabotage, Sabbath Bloody Sabbath, Mob Rules, and probably, between those 4 albums, it could vary where I would rank them. It's kind of a fluid list for me. And then I have Headless Cross in there as well at number 5. And I just think the album is so well written. It sounds great. Tony Martin sounds phenomenal. Some of the best guitar solos I've ever heard Tony Iommi play, in my opinion, are on that album. So that album had a huge, huge impact on me. Then you get the TYR. And again, that album I like quite a bit, but if I were to rank these 4 albums, it would probably be number 4. And the reason being is, while I think the album is good, I don't like it as much as Headless Cross. And to be honest with you, I like the other 2 albums after it better, because then we get into, and TYR is a great album. It kind of continues on sort of that same sound Headless Cross had. Tony Martin sounds phenomenal. It's got 9 songs on it. I think the album is okay. I think it's good. I just don't like it as much as the other 3 albums in this box set, or even the Eternal Idol for that matter. Then we get to Cross Purposes. Now, the interesting thing is, Cross Purposes, I remember when that came out. I was 16 years old, and I remember walking into a music store, and the record label at the time really put a lot of effort in promoting it, because I saw advertisements for this album everywhere, all around the record shop. I'd see them in other music stores as well. It even had its own little kiosk where you could sample and listen to the album if you wanted to, which was something music stores did a lot back then, because you didn't have streaming and you didn't have really any way of checking something out unless you bought it. But in some cases, record labels would get music stores to, make little listening stations where you got a pair of headphones, there's a CD in there, and you pick whatever CD is in that area, or in that CD player that it had, and you got to listen to it. And I remember I was 16 years old, and I'm like, I got to go up and get this album. Well, about 3 months later, I go in, I had enough money to go get it, and it was in the bargain bin. It was on a clearance rack. All the promotional stuff was gone. Apparently, obviously, it didn't sell that well. So I picked up, the copy of the CD went from $17 to $3. And I remember when I bought my original copy of it, because it had a cardboard, the cardboard CD box, if you guys remember those. So again, I was really, really excited to get that. I love that album. That's probably number 2 on the list as far as, in this box set behind Headless Cross. Geezer Butler's on the album. It's just a phenomenal record. Then you had Forbidden, which I did like, but I didn't like it as much as, Headless Cross, Cross Purposes. But Forbidden I thought was kind of a cool record. I didn't really care for the production too much on it. It almost, like, it sounded kind of, the songs were pretty good, but it didn't really sound as good production-wise as the other 3 albums in this box set. But I did like the songs a little bit better than TYR. So let's talk about the remix. I want to give you the good and the bad, because there are a few things I'm disappointed in, and there are a few things that I think sound great. So number one, let me start off with the good. I think the mix on Tony Martin's voice is a lot better. I think the mix made his vocals sound a lot better on this album than they did originally when it came out. And I think the guitars sound a lot better as well. When it comes to the drums, it's okay. I think that, these days drums sound very fake, because a lot of people use triggers these days. I think the drums are okay. I don't think they sound quite as nice as they did on the first mix of the album that originally came out. But to be honest with you, I'm going to go to the one disappointing thing about this album is the keyboards. So I remember listening to this, and I'm thinking to myself the entire time I'm listening to this album, what is missing? Something sounds like it's missing. And then it dawned on me when I ended up getting to the title track, Forbidden, the keyboard parts from Jeff Nichols, who I believe is the keyboard player on that album, were gone. And the thing is, those keyboard parts really added an element to that song that is now missing that really bummed me out. I mean, the song itself is great, but the keyboards in the background of that song really made that song stand out for me. So it sounded really weird with them missing. And, I'll be honest with you, remixes are always hit or miss. I mean, like, you either really like them or you don't like them. Like, for example, I love the remixes Blind Guardian did on Imaginations from the Other Side, Nightfall, Middle Earth, and The Night at the Opera. Those 3 albums, they did a phenomenal job of remixing those. I think it was Brainstorm had an album called Memorial Roots that sounded terrible, but the remix was unbelievable. I mean, it made the album sound so much better. And then if I were to give you a reference of remixes I didn't like very much, let's talk about the remixed albums that Dave Mustaine did for Megadeth. Some of those were, in my opinion, really weren't all that great. I really wasn't liking the So Far So Good So What remix or the Rust in Peace remix. I didn't think was very good. So remixes are hit or miss. Now, in the case of this one, I'm kind of torn on it. In some respects, I like it a lot better. And in other respects, like I just told you, some of the keyboard parts and some of the other parts are missing from these songs that got turned down in the mix. It's kind of like, it's almost as disappointing as having no bass in Justice for All by Metallica. But not quite that disappointing. It's more like, why did he take it out? Because those keyboards sounded great. Now, there is a possibility, because this album was recorded in 1995, that when they go back to get those recordings, maybe those tracks were missing. Sometimes that happens. A good example is something I just talked about. The Rust in Peace remix that Megadeth did, they could not find the vocal tracks for the song Take No Prisoners. So Dave Mustaine had to re-sing that song again in the studio and then obviously mix the vocals down with the music that was recorded back then. So it's very possible that the tracks are missing, and Tony Iommi said, you know what? I'm just not going to bother re-recording it. We'll just leave it as it is. The song is good. And in a sense, the song is still good, but missing those keyboard parts is what really sort of disappoints me. And if I had to give you one negative aspect of this box set, I would say that would be it. Now, there are some bonus tracks on some of these records, on some of these albums, which are pretty good, actually. It's kind of nice to listen to that stuff. But overall, I think the albums as a whole, as a set, number one, I think it's worth buying, especially if you like the Tony Martin era of Black Sabbath. And the set is really well put together. And it's really, really well done as far as the liner notes and in the booklet, the mini replica tour book. I think everything about this set is great. And it's nice to finally have these albums reissued, because I've been waiting for them to do that. Like, I have all the deluxe and super deluxe versions of the entire catalog. Like, I think I bought all the super deluxe versions of the Ozzy albums that came out. And I got to be honest, this set is really nice. So, again, it's worth getting. If you like the Tony Martin era Black Sabbath, definitely check it out. I'm curious, folks, if you've listened to the remix of Forbidden, I'm curious as to what all of you think. Do you like it? Do you dislike it? And what do you like or dislike about that remix? Other than that, folks, check out the box set. Anno Domini 1989 to 1995. And it's definitely worth picking up, in my opinion. As always, thanks for watching, everybody. Please subscribe or follow the channel or the Facebook page. Thanks for watching. Stay metal.